Where did it all go wrong for Kody Brown? How did the man who once preached plural love and family unity end up limited from his own daughter? Truly, while his kids brazenly turn on him, this isn't just another family disagreement. According to insiders close to the sister wives' world, what we're witnessing is nothing short of a generational revolt, with Christine's children leading the charge against their father. What you're about to hear isn't guesswork. It's a tangled web of court filings, private testimony, and emotional fallout that paints a devastating picture of a patriarch losing every ounce of authority he once held. And yes, it features documents and records that most audience members will never get to watch on television. Think about it. Truly the reserved, introspective youngest daughter of Christine and Kody, once who cherished her father in spite of the turmoil that surrounded her, is now at the eye of the hurricane. Limits are set, privileges are restricted, and the rumors indicate the children themselves called for it. It is a betrayal that can only be from within. The same family that catapulted Kody to stardom now serves as his most outspoken critics. One by one, the children are pulling back the curtain and saying out loud what many fans suspected for years, that Kody's favoritism toward Robyn, combined with questionable financial moves, has left lasting damage on every single relationship. We've seen Kody and Robyn brush off criticism before. We've seen them cry manipulation, blame the media, even call their own children ungrateful. But this is different. What is going on here now carries the weight of a court's jurisdiction, the gravity of signed papers, and the emotional power of a daughter who has opted for distance over blind faith. And here is the jaw-dropping news. By exclusive reports, Truly herself might have been the one who informed Christine that she no longer felt safe with Kody. Imagine that. A kid, not even into her teens, drawing a line that even a patriarch cannot delete. This is where the journey starts, with a father confronting the unthinkable truth that his kids, not his former wives, are dismantling him piece by piece. And as you'll see in the next section, it's not only about emotional scars, it's about legal consequences, money trails, and a family that's finally decided to fight back. When the first whispers surfaced that Kody might be restricted from Truly, most people dismissed it as another internet rumor after all. Fans had seen the ups and downs before. Arguments, estrangements, tearful confessions. But this, a legal barrier between father and daughter. It seemed too radical, and, as it has so often with the Browns, the reality proved even more sensational than the rumor. As insider sources revealed in an exclusive report, the origins of this limitation were sown long before Christine left with Truly in tow. Family insiders recall moments sundown, easily missed in the moment, that now appear to be red flags. There was the so-called hospital debacle, when Christine pleaded for money for Truly's surgery, and Kody was more preoccupied with Robyn's children than the daughter struggling to save her health. The fans recall the episode, but what was not filmed was the residual anger Truly harbored from being an afterthought. Then there was the movie drama. Sources reveal that Truly consistently expressed disliking her life to accommodate Kody's changing aspirations, particularly when it became evident that Robyn's preferences were given precedence over all others. These were not mere adolescent gripes. These were sentiments repeated in therapy sessions and ultimately recorded in family court documents. One insider summarized it bluntly: Truly witnessed her dad give everything to Robyn's children, while she felt she received the leftovers. She lost faith in him long ago. The leaks became self-evident when Christine's court filings referred to well-being issues directly related to Kody's spotty participation and emotional instability. Although the documents were painstakingly redacted, one sentence leaped out at people who got to read it. The child has expressed clearly discomfort and prefers limited interaction at this time. And there it was, not Christine insisting on distance, not a judge single-handedly decreeing limitations, but Truly the daughter herself expressing her preference for boundaries. If that wasn't sufficient, other children quickly did likewise. From Janelle's children to even some of Meri's, the rebellion began to take shape. No longer united under the father knows best banner, they quietly but firmly chose sides. And spoiler alert, it wasn't Kody's side. But what makes this more than just a family feud is how those private whispers became courtroom evidence. And in the next section, we'll break down exactly how Christine used the kids' testimonies to force the court's hand, and why that was the turning point Kody never saw coming. The true tipping point didn't come from Christine, Janelle, or even the other wives. It came from the children themselves. And when finally their voices were heard in court, the whole sister-wives story changed forever. Court records, although sealed in portions, verify that testimony from several Brown children was given as part of Christine's request for limitations placed on Kody's visitation with Truly. This wasn't about the opinion of a single child. It was a joint protest by children who had lived for years under what one called a dictatorship disguised as love. Imagine the scene in secret. The judge hears words that pierce more deeply than any spreadsheet or subpoena ever could. A child telling you, "I do not feel safe," when he yells. Another confessed, "He only cares about Robyn's children. The rest of us do not matter." These are not things a father can easily brush off as fan rumors or tabloid speculation. These are attested words that speak the truth, and truly. Her words were perhaps the strongest of all. She said she felt like she didn't belong in the house of her father, that her very presence was a burden. The court sources said, especially paid attention to the emotional maturity of her language. How this little child could so readily express the inequality she'd known. Christine's attorneys pounced on this, insisting that imposed contact would only intensify the wounds. They produced therapy files, journal passages, and even text messages that evidenced the constant tension. The judge, confronted with this irrefutable evidence, had no choice but to entertain limitations. What is more, it wasn't only Christine's children who testified. Janelle's older children spoke out as well, citing years of favoritism, unkept promises, and financial deception. The image that had developed was damning. A dad long since given over to obsession rather than fairness, with a trail of resentment that could no longer be overlooked. And for the very first time, the court did on record. Kody wasn't merely an incendiary television patriarch. He was now officially a parent in restriction. But this decision didn't merely bruise Kody's ego. It led to financial scandals, real estate controversies, and deeper cracks that would render the Brown clan unidentifiable. If the voices of the children ignited the flame, money doused the blaze with gasoline. The fans wondered for years if money was the huge factor behind the breakup of the family. But when the court began to dig, the extent of Kody and Robyn's financial choices became apparent, and it was worse than anybody could have imagined. Christine's lawyers claimed that Kody's abandonment was not only emotional, but financial too. They produced documents detailing how funds intended for the family ended up in Robyn's bank accounts, her high-end shopping sprees, and the infamous Flagstaff mansion. One especially incriminating paper uncovered that while Christine was working overtime to pay for medical expenses for Truly, Kody was sending thousands to property taxes on Robyn's residence. The numbers did the talking. Almost every significant purchase for the last half a decade bore the name of Robyn. At the same time, children of Christine and Janelle are told of needing to do side jobs or turn to distant relatives in order to meet fundamental needs. The imbalance wasn't merely glaring, it was deliberate. Even more surprising were the leaked bank statements. They indicated a pattern of withdrawals that didn't correlate with reported family spending. Christine's attorneys speculated that Kody was secreting money inside accounts, perhaps with the cooperation of Robyn. Although the court stopped short of calling outright fraud in this specific hearing, the judge openly questioned Kody regarding the discrepancies, which he termed as being deeply concerning. And that is where things get fiery. Insider sources tell us that Kody grew defensive during questioning, stating that he was the breadwinner and had full authority to determine what money went where. But that line of argument rebounded in Christine's favor when her attorney waved literal receipts for Robyn's shopping extravaganzas, designer sofas, pricey jewelry, while the other wives went without. The courtroom, according to one source, fell silent as evidence mounted. The backlash was swift. By tying Kody's preference directly to financial damage, Christine's camp repositioned the case. It was no longer merely a matter of emotional abandonment. It was about intentional mismanagement of family assets, and when the children pay the price, when a daughter such as Truly misses out on her future or is abandoned, the court sits up and notices. From that moment on, money was the prism through which every choice was measured. The hidden financial report that turned the whole case around for Christine and left Kody scrambling for a defense. Every courtroom drama has a moment when the tide turns, when one piece of evidence lands with such force that the opposing side can't recover. For Kody, it was when Christine's lawyer presented a document that, up to then, had been the stuff of rumor in the family. It was a book of accounts, quietly procured under discovery, detailing years of disbursements connected with what had been referred to as a family fund. At first glance, the account appeared kosher, a fund of funds for emergencies, children's education, and basic household expenses. But when investigators followed the money, they discovered something shocking. Nearly 80% of the withdrawals were linked directly to Robyn. Not her kids' expenses, not shared bills, but Robyn herself, luxury purchases, travel, even unexplained cash movements that lined up suspiciously with new acquisitions. The kicker, during the very months those withdrawals were happening, Christine had been begging for help covering Truly's basic costs. Christine's lawyer didn't just wave the ledger around. They followed that with the testimony of Janelle's son, who remembered being informed there was no money for his college bills. They presented Christine's own bank records, depleted to pay debts she thought were joint, and then, for dramatic effect, they laid out the timeline side by side. The children struggling on one screen, Robyn's shopping on the other. The judge is said to have leaned forward and cocked an eyebrow during this presentation. As one who was there can attest, you could sense the air change in the courtroom. Kody's defense that he was merely managing family finances wouldn't hold up anymore. The figures told another story, one which showed him to be a man favoring some with hard, cold cash. When questioned further, Kody faltered. He put it down to poor record keeping. He claimed Robyn needed stability. He even insisted that Christine overestimated Truly's needs. But every excuse was responded to with more receipts, more paper trails, more irrefutable proof. By the close of that day, the judge recorded in the record that Kody's financial dealings were highly questionable and directed an outside audit of the account. While not a criminal indictment, the threat was implicit. This wasn't merely favoritism. It was close to financial impropriety. And here is where it gets personal. That journal, now informally referred to by insiders as the smoking gun, didn't only shift the case legally, it infuriated the children. To them, it amounted to proof of what they had long suspected, that their dad cared more about Robyn's comfort than they cared about their futures. If the courtroom journal revealed Kody's favoritism by numbers, the children's reaction revealed it in flesh and blood. What followed wasn't choreographed for television cameras or filtered through TLC's editing. It was raw, uncensored family insurrection. Insiders recount a turning point meeting that occurred soon after Christine's lawyers revealed the financial data. A group of the older children, some Christine's, some Janelle's, met up without Kody or Robyn there. The mood, in the estimation of one who was there, was a mixture of sorrow and anger. For years, they had murmured to one another of the unfairness, of being excluded, of being extras in their own family. But now they had evidence, and evidence alters everything. It is reported that one of Janelle's sons told her, "It is not favoritism anymore. He robbed us." Another, from Christine's camp, inquired simply, "Why should we even look at him if he looks at us like nothing?" Even Meri's daughter, who had long removed herself from the drama, was reported as voicing support, explaining to the group that Kody's behavior pattern had been clear for years. It was a symbolic moment, the children, throughout various mothers, coming together not as half-siblings separated by family politics, but as one unified voice against their father. And there was Truly, the youngest of them all, yet her words are said to have had the most impact. She is quoted to have informed her siblings, "He only wants me when it makes him look good, not when I need him." For a child to come out and say that, in front of her older siblings, was a punch in the gut. A few of them burst into tears. This passive rebellion carried over into the courtroom shortly afterwards, as Christine's attorneys filed signed affidavits from several children. What could have been passed off as an angry teenager might have been one, but it became a trend of rejection, consolidated and unrefutable. Even the judge noted that the degree of consistency between testimonies was rare and compelling. For Kody, the shame was too much. He had always thought of himself as the patriarch, the glue that held things together. Now his own kids were taking his authority apart brick by brick, not with resentment but with desperation. And while this revolt destroyed Kody's credibility within the family, its effect outside was just as detonative. Fans, viewers, even light followers of Sister Wives came to perceive him not as a misunderstood dad, but as a man revealed by his kids, when the children's joint declarations became public record. The courtroom wasn't the only one shaken. The shockwave landed on social media, fan sites, and entertainment media with the intensity of an earthquake. Footage of the testimony was posted, analyzed, and propagated by viewers who'd sat for more than a decade watching the Browns act out their lives on public television. Fans had questioned for years whether Kody actually preferred Robyn, whether Christine's grumblings were mere exaggeration, whether Janelle's patient silence hid bitterness. Now, there was no question. The children themselves had already verified it in their own words. Robyn, feeling the tidal wave shift against her, tried what many insiders refer to these days as a damage control tour. She wept in public at family reunions, in leaked videos from the courtroom, even before the judge. She said she felt misunderstood, unfairly labeled as the villain, yearned for nothing but harmony for the family. But her tears, which worked for her on the show, now rang hollow. Fans had branded them manipulative, with some dubbing her the cry bully of sister wives. One of the viral tweets read, "Robyn cries when she wins, she cries when she loses, she cries when she is caught lying. At some point, the tears don't matter." That was reflected in thousands of comments online, every one of them adding to the developing opinion that Robyn's part in Kody's collapse was no longer a secret. Instead, Kody's image outside of the family collapsed even quicker. Tabloids published headlines portraying him as a charlatan, a failed patriarch, a man brought down not by his wives but by his children. Once ardent fans of the show conceded they did not watch anymore with sympathy, but rather with grim justice, anticipating just how far he would go. The public judgment made a difference, because for years Kody and Robyn had operated under the idea that the TLC cameras were lifelines to them. Public image equated into contracts, contracts into cash, cash into authority. But with the story now beyond their control, their empire collapsed simultaneously from within and without. And just as Kody and Robyn flailed about trying to spin the tale, Christine and Janelle quietly took control. The court decisions started to go in their favor. The children's allegiance switched permanently, and even TLC executives were said to have begun reconsidering their backing of the beleaguered couple. The documentary battles had already revealed favoritism, money, and broken trust, but nothing was as damaging as what was about to follow. A piece of evidence that Christine's lawyers slipped quietly across the table. One that Kody and Robyn believed would never see the light of day. It was a tape, not a TLC segment, not an interview with the family, but a secretly recorded moment years ago. According to sources, the video was found while conducting a routine document review of documents associated with the family trust. Someone, potentially a paralegal, potentially an accountant, ran across it and immediately marked it as significant. The video caught Kody and Robyn in what was intended to be a private discussion. On record, Kody reportedly detailed a plan to invest more family money into accounts solely in Robyn's name, rationalizing it by stating, "The others will complain, but they'll never leave. They need me more than I need them." That one sentence hit like a hammer blow. Throughout years, Kody had insisted that his spending choices were all about stability and security for all. On the show, he spoke about family unity, about sacrifice, about shared vision. But this recording revealed the opposite, a cold calculation, a deliberate plan to tilt the scales in Robyn's favor. Robyn, for her part, was heard on the tape not objecting, but agreeing. At one point, she reportedly said, "As long as it all funnels through us, we'll always be the center. The rest could adapt." The courtroom went silent as the judge played the clip. Christine's team didn't have to dramatize. The words did all the talking. Janelle was observed wiping tears. Christine sat blank, faced, staring ahead. And Kody? Witnesses claim he turned white, his hands so tightly gripping the table that his knuckles went white. The judge's reaction was reserved, but firm. He labeled the tape damning evidence of intentional financial misrepresentation. With that phrase, the case's balance shifted almost completely to Christine and Janelle. Outside court, the response was explosive. Fans had dubbed it the smoking gun. Analysts likened it to the time when a jury sits through the confession tape in a crime show. TLC, caught off guard, made no public comment, but there were whispers that executives were in a panic, deciding if keeping the show on the air would threaten further damage to the network's reputation. And for the kids, the tape was validation and pain. It confirmed what they had always suspected, that their father's decisions hadn't been accidents. hadn't been mistakes, but intentional acts of betrayal. The Browns had weathered countless crises over the years, but this crisis was unique. This wasn't about lifestyle or property disputes. This was about the truth, and with truth on the line, the house of cards collapsed at full throttle. The secret recording changed everything. Until that point, the case had been about broken promises, money, and favoritism. But when the judge heard Kody and Robyn speaking for themselves, scheming to put all the resources in their corner, the tone changed from dismay to safeguarding. The court could now inquire if Kody and Robyn were prepared to falsify funds at the family's expense. What could they possibly do with the children themselves? Christine's lawyers did not delay. They claimed that Truly, even at her young and vulnerable age, was in danger of being emotionally damaged if she remained under the control of Kody and Robyn without anything stopping them. They used the tape as evidence that the couple prioritized their own image and authority over other people's well-being, even their own children. The judge concurred. In a shocking turn of events, he issued a temporary restraining order barring Kody and Robyn from unmonitored contact with Truly. Any contact, the judge held, would require forewarning, supervision, and record-keeping. This was not an alteration in permanent custody, but it was a clear warning. The court no longer believed Kody's word in court. As the decision was read, Christine is said to have wept with relief. Truly had been her biggest fear from the start. For her, this wasn't about winning property or money. It was about protecting her daughter from what she perceived as years of manipulation. Kody, however, blew up. He complained vociferously, decrying the restrictions as unfair, blaming Christine for poisoning Truly against him, and claiming that the judge had misinterpreted the tape. But his tirade only damaged his credibility further. Robyn, as usual, wept. She pleaded with the judge to change his mind, claiming Truly loved her and that breaking them up would be gratuitous pain. But even her crying could not weaken the court's position. The order stuck. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked for comment, but neither Kody nor Robyn would talk. Their silence was in stark contrast to Christine and Janelle, who, though reserved, were thankful that the court had put the children first. April's fans loved this twist of fate. The man who brashly declared himself the head of a big, unbroken family was now limited in how he could visit his own daughter. The optics were disastrous, and although this order was only temporary, insiders suggested that it might become permanent if additional evidence of manipulation or neglect appeared. That shadowy specter hung over Kody and Robyn and added stress to a war they already were losing. But they weren't only criticized in the courtroom. The court order restricting Kody and Robyn's visitation with Truly didn't just shake the family. It rattled the foundation of the show that had turned them into family names. For more than a decade, sister wives lived off tension, off marital conflict, off the juggling act of plural marriage. But the limitations posed a sinister question. Could TLC even continue to film without risking legal or ethical repercussions? Off-camera, producers allegedly were in crisis mode. Executives watched the court papers, observing the judge's directness regarding manipulation and favoritism. This was not the type of narrative TLC could weave as offbeat family drama. It was now an issue of trust, and the court had ruled that Kody couldn't be trusted alone with his own daughter. One source disclosed that a fiery meeting occurred in Los Angeles just days after the decision. On one side, some argued the scandal was ratings gold. Audiences will tune in to see the empire fall, one executive reportedly said. On the other, there were voices warning that exploiting such a sensitive issue could backfire. If the network appeared to prioritize drama over children's well-being, the backlash could destroy the brand entirely. Robyn, sensing the walls closing in, allegedly reached out directly to producers, pleading her case. She protested that she and Kody were being misrepresented, that editing could correct the optics, that fans would come around if only they knew the real story. But producers were unconvinced. Robyn's tears were by now a liability, not an asset. In contrast, Christine and Janelle were getting another sort of attention. Viewers, long divided, were now rallying behind them as beacons of strength. Their social media channels exploded with followers. They were asked for solo interviews, podcasts, even spin-offs. TLC producers couldn't overlook the change. The women that Kody attempted to marginalize were now the ones gaining public sympathy. Several reports indicate that the network started working on contingency plans. What ifs in which Sister Wives would evolve into a show with Christine and Janelle as the stars, replacing or even striking out Kody and Robyn entirely. The irony was vicious. The man who had insisted on being the focal point of every situation was now the disposable cog. But before a decision could be made, the courtroom soap opera produced one more twist. For while TLC waged war over its future, Christine's attorneys disclosed that they held additional evidence in reserve, evidence that would lead the judge to take an even more draconian approach with Kody and Robyn. The courtroom was electric. Cameras caught the moment Kody walked in, his normal confident step giving way to a nervous pause. Robyn followed, equally anxious, realizing today's decision could make everything different. The judge, famous for his thorough style and no-nonsense attitude, had already seen the new evidence Christine's team presented, and it painted a damning portrait. These were not just financial, these were behavioral. Emails, text messages, and even home video footage implied Kody had made a concerted effort to manipulate the children's emotions towards their mothers. Truly's restricted access was just the opening salvo. The judge's follow-up move was specifically designed to break up the control Kody exercised over years. Familiar with the judge's tone by then, the courtroom fell silent when the gavel struck. The decision? Kody's control over family matters, particularly regarding the children, was substantially diminished. Guardianship adjustments were made, supervised visitation became mandatory, and any attempts to override court orders would be met with immediate legal consequences. Robyn's reaction was complex. Some witnesses reported she appeared relieved, while others noted a flash of anxiety. She then had to walk a fine line, standing by Kody while accepting that the court had taken a strong position against his tactics. In the outside world, Christine and Janelle were winners of a kind. Their ongoing chronicling of Kody's ways had not only bolstered their case, but also helped to change popular opinion. The fans inundated social media with admiration, portraying them as guardians of their children's health. This decision had further implications for the Sister Wives series. The producers understood that keeping Kody as a focal point would now be legally and morally complicated. His authority over family stories was undermined, i.e., the soap opera TLC once depended on may no longer be staged. As legal commentators discussed the precedent set by this case, this much was evident. Kody's reputation as the patriarch of a polygamous dynasty was in tatters. And with the kids starting to speak up for themselves, the tension that had characterized Sister Wives for so long was irreparably shifting. The court ruling's aftermath left the family in quiet unease. Kody, despite his outward calm, was visibly shaken by the curtailing of his authority. But the most dramatic change came, not from the court, but from the children themselves. Truly, long a quiet observer in the family hierarchy, became a vocal spokesperson for truth and fairness. Guided by her mothers, she began talking about feelings that had been latent for years. Interviews with family friends brought a brewing frustration to the surface. The kids felt manipulated and ignored, and they wanted their voices heard. It wasn't isolated to Truly. A ripple effect swept across the siblings. Messages previously unspoken came to light, with Kody's efforts at control over opinions and actions blowing up in his face. The children started coming together, remembering and asserting together their need for open communication and independence. Robyn, torn between standing up for her husband and standing with the children, felt the tension herself. Her efforts at mediation were often rebuffed, as the children felt she had cooperated too in the past. In public, she had an ever-calm demeanor, but personal chats emphasized her increasing worry about the children's uprising. Social media went wild as brief quotes of the children voicing their opinions were published by insiders. Fans and pundits argued about whether Kody's long-standing dominance had at last been undone. The story was changing. He was no longer just the patriarch anymore. Now he was the one being challenged by his own family. This new bravery on the part of the children also had legal consequences. Their words and offers to testify in future hearings would offer additional clout to Christine and Janelle, affirming the court's ruling to limit Kody's authority. By the end of this stage, there was a new dynamic. The family, which had been dominated by Kody's sole dictates, was changing into a system in which the voices of the children could no longer be excluded. Truly had ignited a movement, and it was only building. As the kids' rebellion swept along, Kody was confronted with an unwelcome reality. His dominance was no longer absolute. Legal limitations, court monitoring, and public scrutiny had erected an obstacle he could not easily remove. Nevertheless, Kody's resolve to exercise control was unshakable. In secretive gatherings, Kody tried to regain control of choices inside the household. He held formal family meetings, attempting to present them as joint discussions. The kids, however, thwarted him under Truly's leadership. Their protestations were articulate, pointing out inconsistencies in Kody's earlier choices and insisting on being held accountable. Robyn, sensing the tension, tried to intervene, but her power was weak. The children questioned her intentions, citing her past association with Kody's tactics. Even her genuinely well-meaning interventions were received with suspicion, and she found that her credibility had been eroded in the family's eyes. The situation was further fueled by social media and fan comments. Footage of the children standing up for themselves went viral, projecting the image of Kody being out of touch and unable to sustain harmony. This online publicity put pressure on him, and he was compelled to review his strategy. Desperate for solutions, Kody sought the counsel of lawyers, testing the limits of the court's restrictions. However, the verdict was unambiguous. Trying to circumvent the regulations would not only be unsuccessful but might come with dire consequences, even more restrictions on his power. Frustration grew and tensions in the home increased. Disputes, hitherto muted or clandestine, became more open and vocal. Kody's bids to regain authority were countered with direct defiances, leaving him more and more alone. At the close of this phase, Kody was confronted with a hard reality. Leadership in the family was no longer based solely on authority. The voices of the children had changed the family dynamics, compelling a reckoning that would decide the nature of their relationships for years to come. The storm that overwhelmed the Browns culminated when Kody came to realize that no amount of begging, posturing, or strategizing could reclaim the control he once exercised. The judge's decisions, the children's rebellion, and the public's changing view had changed the family landscape forever. Truly became the icon of change. What started as a little girl's soft admission of neglect had expanded into a force for change. With the children all rallying behind her, the family dynamic changed from a single man's control to one united voice that wanted to be heard. Christine, relieved and justified, reveled in her position as defender and caregiver, making Truly and the rest of the children feel strong enough to tell their truths. Janelle, as dependable as ever, provided equilibrium and insight, aiding the family in moving forward without duplication of previous blunders. Even Meri, long on the sidelines, sensed newfound solidarity with her sisters in the face of Kody's decline. Robyn, previously the petted wife, now found herself in an ambivalent position. Though she still defended Kody, her cries and defensiveness no longer held the power they once had. The fans and even stepchildren saw her part with a clearer eye, wondering if she had indeed been a victim of circumstance or an equal partner in the disbalance that destroyed the family. Kody's downfall was both public and personal. Stripped of power by the court, spurned by most of his children, and hounded by fans who once revered his non-traditional way of life, he was left to face a future that bore little resemblance to the empire he had envisioned. The patriarch had been reduced to a shadow, a man who had to sit idly by while the family he attempted to control reassembled in his absence. TLC also shifted its focus. As audiences gravitated toward Christine, Janelle, and the children, the story moved away from Kody's control and toward recovery, resilience, and self-sufficiency. What had been the story of a man juggling several wives had become one of women and children taking back their strength. Ultimately, the Brown story told something greater than the fall of one man. It was now a tale of survival, of truth prevailing over manipulation, and of silenced voices now being heard at last. It marked the end of an era for Kody, for Christine, Janelle, Meri, and the children. It was the beginning of something new, and for viewers who had followed the family's journey for more than a decade, it was the final proof that reality, unfiltered and undeniable, was far more dramatic than any scripted television could ever hope to be.